Imagine praying your whole life and still not being heard. Imagine dedicating hours, days, years, repeating words, asking, begging, hoping, and yet something feels empty, as if your voice never truly reaches beyond your own mind. What if I told you that what most people call prayer was never what Jesus intended? What if the very thing you were taught to do is the reason you feel disconnected? And more importantly, what if there is a way of connecting so real, so profound, that it dissolves fear, doubt, and separation completely? Stay with me until the end, because the last revelation may change everything you think you know about God, about yourself, and about the invisible connection between both. Throughout history, countless seekers, mystics, and philosophers have tried to decode the true meaning behind the words of Jesus. From Meister Eckhart to Carl Jung, from the Desert Fathers to modern spiritual thinkers, many have pointed to the same unsettling idea, that true prayer is not what we have been practicing. Think about this. If prayer were simply words, why would Jesus warn against empty repetition? If prayer were about asking, why did he say, "Your Father knows what you need before you ask him"? And if prayer were about external rituals, why did he constantly point inward? There is something hidden here, something subtle but transformative. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Before we go deeper, take a moment now. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with someone who is searching for deeper truth. And in the comments, tell me, what does prayer mean to you? Because what you are about to discover may redefine that answer completely. Most people were taught that prayer is a request, a plea, a negotiation with the divine. But Jesus spoke of something entirely different, something closer to alignment than asking, something closer to realization than repetition. In the Gospel of Matthew, he says, "When you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen." Why unseen? Why hidden? Why alone? Because what he was pointing to was not a performance. It was an inner state, a shift in awareness, a movement from noise into silence, from separation into union. This idea echoes through ancient traditions. In Hermetic philosophy, it is said, "The all is mind." In the Upanishads, we find that which you seek is already within you. And Carl Jung once wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Do you see the pattern? Jesus was not teaching people how to speak to God. He was teaching them how to dissolve the illusion that they are separate from him. But if that is true, then why do so many still pray and feel nothing? Why does it feel like something is missing? In the next part, we will uncover the hidden mistake almost everyone makes when they pray, and why it silently blocks the very connection they are seeking. There is a subtle mistake, so common, so deeply ingrained, that most people never question it. And yet, this single misunderstanding may be the very thing standing between you and the connection you are seeking. Think about how most people pray. They ask, they request, they beg. Give me this, help me with that, remove this pain, change this situation. At first glance, it seems natural, but look deeper. What is hidden behind every request? A feeling of lack, a belief that something is missing, a silent assumption that what you need is not already present. Now ask yourself this: can a state of lack ever create a state of fulfillment? Neville Goddard, a mystic deeply influenced by biblical teachings, once said, "Prayer is not asking. Prayer is the feeling of the wish fulfilled." This changes everything, because if prayer is rooted in lack, it reinforces separation. But if prayer is rooted in fulfillment, it dissolves it. Jesus hinted at this in a way that most people overlook. In the Gospel of Mark, he says, "Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." Not believe that you will receive, not hope that it might happen, but believe that it has already been given. Why would he say that? Unless true prayer is not about asking for something to happen, but about entering a state where it already is. This aligns with what modern psychology suggests about the subconscious mind. Carl Jung spoke about the power of inner images and beliefs shaping external reality. When you feel something deeply, your mind begins to organize your perception, your actions, and even your opportunities around that state. So what if prayer is not about changing God's mind, but about transforming your own? What if it is not a request sent outward, but a realization awakened within? This is why Jesus warned against vain repetitions, because repetition without awareness becomes noise, and noise cannot create clarity. Now consider this. If true prayer is a state of being, then words are secondary. Silence becomes powerful, feeling becomes the language, and presence becomes the doorway. But here is where it becomes even more profound, because there is something even deeper than feeling fulfilled, something that most people never reach. In the next part, we will explore what Jesus truly meant when he said, "The kingdom of God is within you," and why understanding this changes the very nature of prayer itself. The kingdom of God is within you. Luke, pause for a moment and really feel the weight of these words. Not around you, not above you, not somewhere distant waiting to be reached. Within you. If this is true, then everything changes, because it means that what you are seeking is not separate from you. It means that the connection you are trying to establish already exists. And more than that, it means that what you call prayer may not be a bridge to God, but a return to what you already are. Now ask yourself, if the kingdom is within, why are you searching outside? Why are you directing your attention outward when the source is inward? This is where most people unknowingly drift away from the essence of what Jesus taught. They externalize the divine. They imagine God as something distant, something to be reached, something to be convinced. But Jesus consistently pointed in the opposite direction, to the inner chamber, to the unseen, to the silent depth of being. Meister Eckhart, one of the most profound Christian mystics, once said, "The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me." This is not poetry. This is a radical statement about unity. It suggests that the separation between you and the divine is an illusion created by perception. And if that illusion dissolves, then prayer, as most people know it, becomes unnecessary. Because there is no distance to close, no entity to persuade, no gap to bridge. Instead, there is only awareness, presence, being, and in that state, something remarkable happens. You stop asking, and you begin recognizing. You stop seeking, and you begin remembering. This idea also echoes in ancient Hermetic teachings, as within, so without. What you experience externally reflects what is established internally. So, if your inner world is rooted in fear, doubt, and lack, your outer reality will mirror that. But if your inner world shifts into alignment, clarity, and wholeness, everything begins to reorganize. Not magically, but naturally. Now consider this. If prayer is not about asking, and if the divine is already within, then what is the true purpose of prayer? What is Jesus really inviting you to do? The answer lies in something even more subtle, something that goes beyond words, beyond belief, and even beyond thought itself. In the next part, we will uncover the silent form of prayer, the one that requires no words, yet transforms everything. There is a form of prayer, so quiet, so subtle, that most people overlook it completely, because it does not sound like prayer, it does not look like prayer, and yet, it may be the only form that truly connects. It is silence, not the absence of noise, but the presence of awareness, a silence that is alive, a silence that listens without asking. When Jesus withdrew to lonely places, when he spent nights alone, when he stepped away from the crowds, what was he doing? Was he repeating words? Was he asking for things? Or was he entering a state beyond thought, beyond language, beyond identity? The Desert Fathers, early Christian mystics who lived in solitude, believed that true communion with God happens in stillness. They spoke of a prayer without words, a prayer of the heart, a state where the mind becomes quiet and something deeper begins to emerge. In modern terms, this resembles what psychologists call deep awareness, or what some traditions describe as pure consciousness. But this is not just a technique, it is a shift in being. Because in silence and the constant noise of the ego fades, the endless cycle of wanting, fearing, comparing begins to dissolve. And what remains is presence. Now ask yourself, how can you hear something subtle if your mind is always loud? How can you perceive truth if your attention is scattered? Silence is not empty. It is the space where clarity arises. This is why the Psalms say, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still, not ask more, not speak louder, not repeat endlessly. Be still, because knowing does not come from effort. It comes from alignment, and in that stillness, something begins to reveal itself, not as a voice from outside, but as a recognition from within. Carl Jung suggested that the deeper layers of the psyche are not separate from what ancient traditions called the divine, that what we seek as God may be intimately connected to the deepest part of our own being. If that is true, then silence is not a void. It is a doorway to something that has always been there, waiting beneath the noise. But here is the paradox. Most people cannot remain in silence, because when everything becomes quiet, they are left with themselves, and that can be uncomfortable. In the next part, we will explore why facing yourself is the most difficult form of prayer, and why avoiding it keeps you disconnected from the truth. There is something most people spend their entire lives avoiding, and yet it is the very place where true connection begins. Yourself. Not the version you show to the world, not the identity you have built over time, but the raw and unfiltered, silent awareness beneath it all. When the noise fades, when the distractions disappear, when there is nothing left to do, nowhere left to run, you meet what has always been there. And for many, this is not peaceful. It is uncomfortable, because in that silence, everything you have avoided begins to surface. Fears, doubts, unresolved pain, hidden beliefs. This is why most people prefer noisy prayers, endless words, repeated phrases, constant asking. Because as long as the mind is occupied, it does not have to face itself. But Jesus never pointed people toward escape. He pointed them toward truth, and truth is not always comfortable. Carl Jung described this process as confronting the shadow, the parts of yourself you deny, suppress, or refuse to see. He believed that true transformation begins when you face these aspects, not when you run from them. Now think about this. If God is within, and you avoid looking within, what are you really avoiding? Could it be that what you fear facing is the very doorway to what you seek? This is why true prayer is not passive. It is not just sitting quietly. It is an encounter with everything you are and everything you have hidden. The mystics understood this deeply. St. John of the Cross spoke of the dark night of the soul, a phase where all illusions fall away and the individual is left in a state of inner emptiness. But this emptiness is not punishment. It is purification, a stripping away of everything false so that what is real can emerge. Now ask yourself, how can you connect with truth if you are avoiding parts of yourself? How can you experience unity if you are divided within? This is where most people turn back, because facing yourself requires courage. It requires honesty. It requires letting go of the identity you have spent years building. But beyond this point, something extraordinary begins to happen, because once you stop resisting yourself, you stop resisting reality. And when that happens, the separation you once felt begins to dissolve. In the next part, we will uncover what happens when this resistance disappears and why it leads to a state that Jesus described as true faith. There comes a moment, subtle, almost imperceptible, when resistance begins to fade, not because you forced it, not because you achieved something, but because you stopped fighting, you stopped trying to control everything, you stopped trying to become something else, and for the first time you allowed yourself to simply be. This is where something profound begins to unfold, because what you once called effort gives way to trust. And what you once called prayer transforms into something entirely different. Jesus spoke of this state many times, but few truly understand it. He called it faith, not belief in something external, not blind acceptance, but a deep, unwavering alignment with what is. According to your faith be it unto you. This was not a promise of reward. It was a description of how reality responds to your inner state. Faith, in this sense, is not hoping things will work out. It is living as if they already have. It is the absence of inner conflict, the absence of doubt, the absence of resistance. And when there is no resistance, there is flow. Think about this. When you are not divided within, when your thoughts, emotions, and awareness are aligned, there is clarity, there is direction. There is a quiet certainty that does not need validation. This is why Jesus often said, "Your faith has made you whole." Not your words, not your rituals, not your requests, your state of being. Neville Goddard expanded on this idea, teaching that faith is the feeling of the wish fulfilled, sustained without contradiction. And modern neuroscience supports something similar. When your mind and emotions are coherent, your actions become consistent, your perception sharpens, and your reality begins to reflect that internal order. So what if faith is not something you try to have, but something that naturally arises when you are no longer in conflict with yourself? This changes everything, because it means you do not need to force belief. You need to remove resistance. And when resistance disappears, faith is what remains. Now consider this. If true prayer is silence, if connection is within, if transformation requires facing yourself, and if faith emerges from inner alignment, then what is the final step? What completes this process? The answer is simpler than you think, but also the most difficult to live. In the next part, we will reveal what it truly means to live in prayer, and why this is the teaching that changes everything. There is a point where prayer is no longer something you do. It becomes something you are, not a moment in your day, not a ritual you perform, but a way of existing, a way of perceiving, a way of moving through life. This is what it means to live in prayer. And this is what Jesus was pointing to. Pray without ceasing. At first, this seems impossible. How can someone pray all the time? How can you speak endlessly without stopping? But what if he was not talking about words? What if he was describing a state, a continuous awareness, a constant alignment, a life lived from presence instead of reaction? When you live this way and everything changes, your thoughts become more intentional, your emotions become more stable, your actions become more conscious, and slowly, the division between sacred and ordinary begins to disappear, because everything becomes sacred. Every moment becomes an opportunity for awareness. Every interaction becomes a reflection of your inner state. This idea appears in many traditions. In Hermetic teachings, it is said that the wise live in accordance with universal laws, not by force but by understanding. In Buddhism, mindfulness is the path, the continuous awareness of each moment. And in the words of Jesus, the kingdom of God is at hand. Not someday, not somewhere else, now, here. But here is the challenge. Most people return to unconscious patterns. They react, they judge, they fall back into fear, doubt, and distraction. And when that happens, they believe they have lost the connection. But the connection was never lost, only forgotten. Living in prayer is not about perfection. It is about remembrance, returning again and again to awareness, returning again and again to presence, returning again and again to alignment. Now ask yourself, what would your life look like if every thought, every emotion, every action came from a place of awareness? What would change if you no longer lived in reaction, but in presence? This is not a distant ideal. It is a practice, a continuous unfolding. And yet, there is one final realization, one that brings everything together in a way that is both simple and deeply transformative. In the final part, we will uncover the ultimate truth behind what Jesus meant when he showed that true prayer is not something you say, but something you realize. At the end of all seeking, all questioning, all effort, there is a realization so simple that the mind often overlooks it. You were never separate, not from God, not from truth, not from the source you have been trying to reach. Every word, every ritual, every attempt to connect was pointing towards something that has always been here, and yet, hidden in plain sight. Jesus expressed this in a way that many have read, but few have truly understood. I and the Father are one. Not similar, not connected, one. This was not just a statement about himself, it was a revelation about the nature of being. Because if the divine is within, and if separation is an illusion, then true prayer is not communication. It is realization. The realization that what you seek is what you are. This is why words eventually fall away, because there is nothing left to ask, nothing left to request, nothing left to negotiate, only to recognize, only to be. The ancient traditions have always pointed to this. In the Upanishads, it is said, Tattvam Asi, you are that. In Hermetic wisdom, the all is mind. And Meister Eckhart declared, the closer you are to God, the more you become yourself. Do you see it now? All paths, all teachings, all insights converge into the same truth. Not a truth to believe, but a truth to experience. Now take a moment and reflect deeply. If you are not separate, if what you seek is already within, if prayer is not asking God but aligning, then what changes in your life? Starting now, will you continue asking as if something is missing? Or will you begin to live as if everything is already present? This is the shift, this is the awakening, this is what Jesus was pointing to when he showed that true prayer is not something you say, it is something you realize. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like and share this video with someone who is ready to see beyond appearances. And in the comments, tell me, what changed in the way you see prayer after this? Because sometimes, one realization is enough to transform everything. Transform